This film that you are about to see is a combination of color slides and 16mm movies. The time span is from March of 1950 through 1951. The picture you're looking at right now is in Manila Harbor, looking out over the city. I had just purchased a camera and I'm down at the harbor waiting for your ship to arrive, and you are coming in to Manila on the U.S. Navy Mitchell. This is the famous Manila Hotel in downtown Manila. The top floor of this hotel is, while we were stationed there, was always reserved for General MacArthur. General MacArthur, although he's commander-in-chief and lived in Japan, they always maintained the top floor of the hotel, or kept it reserved for him. Here's another picture looking out over Manila Bay. These pictures are a little faded and washed out, but about the best I could find. Three Air Force officers standing on the pier waiting for the ship Mitchell to arrive also. Here's a picture of the officers' homes on Clark Air Force Base with a Mount Arayat in the background. It's a volcanic mountain that was inactive. We used to sit out here on the front porch or out front yard where we are in the yard of the house we lived in, and we could watch the smoke and watch the artilleries blast into that mountain at nighttime. It seemed like that they always had some sort of battle going on between the Filipino Constabulary, which is your state police, against communist activity groups, and they used to get around and seemed like they do an awful lot of fighting around that mountain for some reason. We used to watch it kind of like a sideshow in the evenings. I didn't get any pictures, or I cannot find any pictures of your arrival at the Manila itself, or in Manila from the ship. I don't know whether they got destroyed or what, but anyway, there is no pictures of your arrival off of the ship. Here's a picture of our home on Clark Field. Kathy's sitting there by Mother. It's not too clear, but she is sitting there. Here's a picture sitting in the dining room of the home. It was a very nice officers' quarters. 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. Plus we had a maid's live-in quarters, which is a bathroom and a bedroom that was off from the kitchen. And we did have a full-time Filipino housemaid that took care of the house and also helped take care of you kids. Another picture of the Clark Field area. The officers' quarters were in the foothills of a mountain range that was just off to the west boundary of Clark Air Force Base, which in those days they called them Clark Fields. The one thing I do remember about you two was when you arrived in Manila in March of 1950. I was amazed at how pale both of you had looked. You had just come through a winter there in Arnett, Oklahoma, and Kathy had just gone through a severe accident and by falling out of an automobile driven by Granddad, and the only reason she's alive that she was completely covered in a heavy snowsuit, and even though it did burn off most of the heavy fur on the snowsuit, Kathy did come through pretty good, except the fact that she did peel a lot of her scalp off. Then while she was coming over on the Mitchell, she caught pneumonia, and she was in bed most of the time of that 30-day trip over on the Mitchell. So the time she got to the Philippines, she was very pale and very much underweight. Kathy was, or Butch was also pale, but it didn't take you kids long to start getting your suntan once you got over here. Here's a picture, of course, the setting on the front porch. This had a big screened-in front porch on this house. It made it very nice. In the evening time, we could sit in out on the front porch and catch the cool breeze without being completely smothered with malaria-carrying mosquitoes. As I stated before, here's Kathy, and she's very much underweight, very pale when she got off the ship Mitchell. She was just recovering from pneumonia while she was on the ship. Here's a picture of that new Kaiser automobile that we bought just before we took off overseas for the Pacific. It's a brand new car. To give you an idea how pale Butch was at the time. These pictures were made in March of 1950. Kind of a wild picture of Kathy. Couldn't resist showing it to you. In May of 1950, General MacArthur got pretty good indication that they were about to get involved in the Korean War. Or something was about to happen in Korea. So I suddenly got orders in May which we'd only been in the Philippines for 2 months. And I got orders from the Pacific headquarters to transfer immediately to Guam. So without any more say-so in the matter, we had to pack up again and head out. And this is the ship Darby down in Manila Bay. And we rode on the ship Darby to Guam. And this move occurred in May of 1950. Here's a picture of the upper deck on Darby as we started sailing out of Manila Bay. This is the picture of Corregidor Island as we were sailing out of Manila Bay. This is where one of the famous battles occurred at the start of World War II. This is a picture of the capital of Guam, called Agate, Guam. Picture's very much overexposed, but it shows those white beaches there at Guam. Here's a picture of Eileen, Butch, and Kathy. These pictures are taken in May of 1950, and this is a picture of the three of us in water out on the beach there. Some of the coral rock sticking up out of the water. This was our first time on the beach there at Guam. And this is shortly after we had arrived in Guam from Philippines. In just a short 2 months, you can see Kathy's beginning to put a little weight on and get a little color back, which also same condition for Butch. Kathy, for the first time, is starting to smile and appears to be enjoying herself thoroughly out there in that ocean. This is our first time. This is your first time on the ocean, which occurred there on Guam. This is our home on Guam on Anderson Field. The little boy there sitting next to Butch, it was a next door neighbor. As you can see, these homes were strictly a concrete block type house with louvers for windows. We didn't have any glass in the window. All we had was screen and louvers. Very warm on Guam. As you can see, the louvers were kept open just for ventilation. Concrete floor, slab roof floor, concrete slab roof floor, and a concrete slab roof. The next few pictures were made in August of 1950. Now this is the month that Colleen was born. This picture is in the backyard of our home here on Guam. That sun was pretty harsh, so I had put a grass mat on top of their box, their sandbox. As you can see, you guys are starting to turn brown pretty quick. Well, here's Cookie, Colleen Higgins, 1 week old. She was 1 week old when I took these pictures. I had to get Colleen outside in the sun so I could get her first outdoor picture. Here's a picture of Colleen when she is 6 weeks old. 6 weeks old. You can see at 6 weeks old she had lost all of her hair. As you see, I bought Butch his first Lionel train set in the background on the dining room table. These next 3 or 4 pictures was made in March of 1951. I had just arrived from Okinawa, and this is the first time I'd seen you kids in several months. The last time I took pictures of you was back in September and October. So while I was visiting with you guys, while your mom was taking pictures of me, as you see, Cookie is growing pretty good. If you remember, Butch, the reason I made this flight back to Guam, I came in from Okinawa on an emergency flight back to Guam because you had been in a hospital for the past several weeks, not weeks, I guess several days, with a strep throat, and the penicillin wasn't taking any effect. So the flight surgeon had contacted me and to tell me that it was very possible that they were going to have to fly you back to the United States, because in the tropics, an infection of strep throat or such infection of that kind is almost impossible to cure in the tropics. So I got an emergency leave and flew in to Guam. Just a day or two before I arrived, the penicillin started taking effect, and they were able to release you the day that I arrived in Guam. If you also remember, I had just received my replacement from the United States to take my place, because I was coming up on the end of the tour of my tour of duty. And while I was down here in March of visiting, this replacement was flying in my position, and he was hit by anti-aircraft and was killed. So I guess strange things do happen. Kathy's beginning to look a little chubby there. She's sure a lot of difference between the time that she arrived in the Philippines to the time we were just about ready to leave Guam. You kids sure have grown. The picture doesn't show it very much, but both of you guys were just about as brown as Mexicans. And this was just about what you wore all the time. Now, following this picture, I'm going to show about 4 or 5 minutes. I don't believe it's that long, about 2 or 3 minutes of Cookie and Kathy with my 16mm movie camera that I had just purchased in Okinawa. The pictures will be in black and white. And this is actually the first movies that was taken of you kids. And as I say, this is going to be a short movie of Cookie and Kathy. These pictures continue in May of 1951. This is the month and the year that we returned back to the States from Guam. We took a few pictures around the island before we got on the ship to come home. So a few of these pictures will show a little bit of the scenery around Guam. This is a picture made in the backyard of our house there in the housing area. This is the Navy hospital complex on Guam where Cookie was born. The hospital consisted of a series of low buildings like this building right here. And as you can see, this is the Naval Hospital Administrative Building. And the ward complexes were simply that type of building in behind the administration building. So this is where you were born, Cookie. You got a very serious look on your face there, Cookie. Guam did have a pretty good range of hills that ran down through the center of the island. And this is the little town of Umatic, U-M-A-T-I-C, Umatic, down in those palm trees there. This is a World War II Japanese two-man submarine. The submarine is so small that you cannot even stand up in it. You can see that it has two torpedo tubes in front. Two men operated the whole submarine. I can't imagine two men having to live in that small of a circumference and going out into the Pacific Ocean with it. As you can see on the rear end of that submarine, it had one propeller shaft and a very large propeller. The propeller turned over at a very slow RPM. The whole island of Guam is literally covered with coconut trees. And at the end of World War II, our federal government paid each Guamanian $1 for his damaged coconut trees. So each Guamanian was able to claim umpteen thousand trees destroyed during World War II and during our invasion of Guam. So as a result of this huge payment for wartime damages, the Guamanians came out as very rich people. It was impossible to find a Guamanian that was willing to work for you. So all of our servants and all of our labor forces came from the Philippines and were shipped in by the Navy to do labor work for the military. The Guamanians had so much money they didn't want to work. Another interesting thing that happened on Guam while we were there, World War II ended in 1945. And of course this is May of 1951. But just about the beginning of 1951 here on Guam, they found a Japanese soldier that had been living alone and hiding out from the American force back in those hills that you see there in the background. They thought they had someone back there that was hiding out for the past 2 or 3 years, but they never could see him or never could find him, because but once in a while a couple of their chickens would be missing or something like that. But anyway, they finally found this Japanese soldier. He still thought the war was going on. He still thought that Japan was winning the war, and it took a lot of convincing to get him to surrender, because their belief during World War II was it was much better to commit suicide than to surrender. But anyway, he'd been living as a hermit and hiding out there in those hills in the background for the past 5 years. There were a lot of beaches on the island of Guam where you couldn't go swimming because of most of the beaches had a lot of underwater reefs that were just a few inches below the water, or the undertow was so great that it was dangerous. This was simply a lookout point that looked out over the ocean, and that sign does say beach and reef, out of bounds. There's that brand new Kaiser car again. Some kids rode by on the road there riding their water buffaloes. Kids would take their water buffaloes out to the field, so they could work some of their rice fields or garden vegetable fields, and then of course they would ride them back in again, back into town. There's one of those destroyed coconut trees over in the left foreground there by the house. These Guamanians lived in homes about of this caliber. They didn't do much about taking care of the yard. You'd think the house might be abandoned, but a family lives in that house. And of course there are houses, homes like that all over the island. However, those hills back there in the middle of the island, it runs down through the center of the island. The island's a long peninsula, about 30 miles long, and the island's about 8 miles wide. Those hills are pretty inaccessible. That's the reason that Jap soldier was able to survive for 5 years back in there without anybody really knowing that he was there. Well, we're down in the Manila Harbor and we're getting ready to go home. We returned back to the States in May of 1951. This picture was actually taken off the deck of the ship Butner, B-U-T-N-E-R, Navy ship Butner. This is the ship that we rode, or that carried us back to the States. There's people down on the dock there waving to other people, saying goodbye off the ship is about ready to sail. Now, following this slide picture here, I will be showing you a few minutes of movies that I took on the ship Butner, and it is in black and white. So following this picture, we will go into a few minutes of black and white movies. Well, we're getting ready to pull away from the dock now. This is color film that's gone bad. That's the reason it's blurry right now. I can't do much with it. There's the band down there playing for us. The Navy band always plays for departing passenger ships. Got the plank all stowed away, and we're pulling away from the dock right there. There's some tugboats helping us get out of the harbor. That was pretty bad, wasn't it? Well, what we saw is what we're going to get. As I ran that movie film through the projector, it literally came apart. That is about the only bad film that I have. And it got moisture in it or something, and it was just like brittle celluloid. I've been working on that film for 4 days now, trying to patch it back together to run it through one more time. But it's just impossible, so I had to give up on it. So what we saw there is it. There'll be no more repeat on that particular reel of film. I'm going to show a few color slides with a little bit more clarity. So what we're seeing here is a tug in the Guam harbor that is helping our ship Buckner out of the bay. So we've retreated back to Guam here with some color slides. This is the cliff line entrance to the harbor at Guam. There's a little reference here. Tinian is in the foreground and Saipan is in the background, and these are islands in the Marianas, which Guam is a part of. Now Tinian, the airport we see there, or the airfield we see at Tinian there in the foreground, is where the Emilo Gay B-29 took off that dropped the first atomic bomb on Tokyo, on Japan in Hiroshima. Those two airports are abandoned now. They're not being used unless they're used today, but during the Korean War they were inactive. There's Kathy and Butch looking out over the ship, heading for home. That's a gun turret under that cover up there in front. And you have to remember this is a Navy passenger ship. However, we were in the Korean War at the time, so they did have a couple of guns on these passenger ships. This is taken inside of one of the ship lounges. Cookie had to stay in her play crib. so she didn't get outside very much. This is a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. This is what I was trying to show on the movie film. And of course the film had got bad and was so blurry. But when we came in at sunrise that morning, facing east, complete overcast, and right there at the Golden Gate Bridge was an opening where you could see it just at almost at sunrise. It was a very beautiful sight to all of us. Here we are just about ready to go underneath the bridge, coming into San Francisco. Kind of foggy in the background, but that is Alcatraz Island over there. The bay was a little bit foggy when we went back into it there. This is Alcatraz Island right here. Well, we finally got off the ship and entered San Francisco. So we spent about a half a day just walking around down in the harbor area, trying to get our land legs back. I really didn't get my so-called land legs back for a couple of days. In other words, what I'm saying is after you do finally get off the boat, you still want to wobble in your walk like you're controlling yourself against the rock of the boat. It's a very queasy feeling that you have. Those are beautiful roses or flowers, aren't they? I don't know what they are. It's what I call the Nob Hill of San Francisco. It's where all your downtown high-rise condominiums and hotels are. If I remember right, this is the old clock tower down at the harbor area. Well, we're getting ready to head back into Arnett, Oklahoma. That's a picture of the Oakland Bridge that we'll be crossing over into Oakland and heading back to Arnett, and then of course my next station assignment, which is Roswell, New Mexico. These last two pictures is probably a good fitting place to end this sequence of pictures. We've just driven up on top of Donner Summit Pass in the month of June, and we had to stop the car so that Kathy and Butch could get out in their sandals and shorts to play in the snow. It's been a long time since they'd seen snow. And of course, Butch was about the only one that really knew, I think, remembered snow, and I'm not really sure that he remembered what it looked like. So this is where we'll call the end to it, right here. Back out of the tropics and into the snow belt.